Welcome into another edition of WRAL Triangle and Two. I'm Mark Bergin. He's Luis Fernandez. On today's episode, we'll discuss the eligibility of North Carolina wide receiver Tez Walker. But we start, Luis, the Panthers have struggled a bit in two preseason games. I know it's the preseason, but we've gotten 2 games of Bryce Young now, 3 total points. Guess where we start? Like, is it time to panic? I know it's just preseason. Where do you stand on the Panthers' offensive struggles through 2 games thus far in the preseason?
So one of the best, I think, things I've ever heard about preseason, how to assess preseason football in general, right, is you look at more and on an individual level instead of a team level. Because, if you look at the final score, oh man, the Panthers aren't scoring touchdowns. Well, half of it's the backups, right? So I think you look at an individual level. And there are definitely offensive struggles. I think it's pretty clear that the offensive line has struggled a bit. What's hard is the takeaway of, okay, is this something where it's like the offensive line is not playing well, or is it just, they're not trying to execute their best plays because they don't want to give away too much in the preseason? It's kind of this combination of all things. You're like, okay, what is the main takeaway here? I think one of the biggest issues is pass blocking. Bryce Young has had a lot of pressure in his face. He's getting hit, but like, also part of that is that's what he's going to get hit, right? Like, if you have a problem with Bryce Young getting hit, then you shouldn't have drafted a 5'9" quarterback. But I just think all in all, I mean, you're seeing flashes from Bryce Young, that kind of creativity that he has. In the Giants game, I think you saw a couple flashes from Jonathan Mingo, which is impressive. They need to shore up the pass blocking, and I believe that once you get to the regular season, you're going to see more scheming specifically to try and counteract pass blocking deficiencies. But yeah, I don't know. It's not ideal, but it's also not like the roof's on fire yet.
I'm with you there. Let me preface any of my thoughts about preseason with this, Luis. I always take the analogy of my guy, Dave Damashek. It's like a war reenactment where it looks like the real thing. It feels like the real thing. It has absolutely zero bearing on the outcome and the result and what will happen during the regular season. So it's funny, though, in the first game, like what I was most looking forward to in a weird way is like, can Bryce Young get hit and get back up off the ground after getting hit?
Which he did.
Yes, he's demonstrated the ability to do that. And now it's like, ooh, man, through 2 preseason games, I don't want to continue to see this. But I also like the fact that we've seen that he can do that, because that was the big knock on him with his lack of size coming out of Alabama.
Yeah, I think it's so much with rookies, especially. It's about catching up to the speed, to the pace of play. So I think that takes time. You're starting to see bits and pieces of, like I said, the flashes. There was one play that Theo Ash on TikTok, for anyone who follows, really pointed out, where it was the play where I think the ball, there's some pressure on him. He spins, he falls down for a second, he rolls out of the pocket, and he nearly throws a dot down the field to Adam Thielen, but it's just outside of his reach, all this stuff, where you see like, oh man, that's how he's special. That's why the Panthers went out and got him. So I agree. I think you assess the individual, and then you worry about the team stuff once the regular season starts. If anything, I think maybe it's just a reminder that everyone should be a little bit patient with this new look Panthers, especially their offense, because like, I don't know. I think the main takeaway for me with the Panthers as a team this year is you just want to see development. You want to, by the end of the year, be like, I feel pretty good that Bryce Young is the franchise quarterback, is the guy. Wins and losses, I think obviously they matter, but in the back of your mind, I think they're a little bit secondary, because if the Panthers are getting to the playoffs and having major success this season, they're ahead of schedule. So that's kind of how I assess it. That's kind of how I view it. Offensive line struggles.
We'll talk about that in just a second. I want to stay on Young for just one more question for you, Luis. Would you start Young in the final preseason game?
I mean, I don't know. I guess the question is, have you seen something from? Do you still need to see more from him? Are you worried about the rhythm of the offense?
For me, it's the timing and the rapport with the receivers to where, I don't think you can get enough game reps or as close to what will be a regular season speed. And even in a preseason game, that speed, even at a high level practice, it just can't be replicated the same way as it is to say, hey, we're playing an actual game, even if it is preseason. I would personally start him. I think he needs the reps. Now, I wouldn't keep him out there for more than 2 series. I'd only play him for a series or 2, but I would play him. That's just my 2 cents worth, though.
I get what you're saying from the rhythm perspective, because I do think there's this, just with preseason football in general, right? You have one side that's like, we're gonna play good amount of stuff. You have another side that's like, not starters aren't gonna get like any reps, right? And it feels like you have these two. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I guess if you were the Panthers, the way you would assess it from a Bryce Young perspective specifically is, do you feel like that rapport has been built, or does it need to continue being built? And how are you happy with how much he's been hit so far in the preseason? And do you want to try and curb that? That to me is the main thing that you're going to assess in determining, is he going to get that third preseason game or not. I don't really feel strongly one way or another. I think if they decide to, sure. If they decide not to, okay, that's fine too. Just really at this point, just 3 weeks away, get to the regular season, and see what he does against Falcons.
The main thing is keeping him healthy for
Bingo.
week 1. So that's the main thing. I want to talk about offensive line, and specifically Ickey Ekwonu, player out of NC State. We loved coming out of the draft. And he's what we call, Lewis, a dancing polar bear. And here's what I mean by that: to where on screen passes, on plays where he has to pull, he's able to get to the second and third level of defenses with size and speed that a man of his stature shouldn't be able to move at. But through 2 preseason games, it's not a hyperbole to say he struggled. And we were also very high on Kayvon Thibodeaux out of Oregon, an edge rusher for the Giants that made Ickey Ekwonu look point blank, period, foolish. Like, to where this impacts Bryce Young, because Ekwonu, who by and large had a very good rookie year, but you're protecting the blind side of your number 1 pick, the face of your franchise, the CEO of your franchise in Bryce Young. Ekwonu had a pretty solid rookie year other than the week 1 matchup against Myles Garrett, but he was overmatched against the Giants, and it's something that definitely needs to be shored up. Again, if this continues on to the regular season, that's when I'm going to say, hey, this is a big deal. But it's something that I noticed on where there were several plays in one-on-one matchups. You're not scheming to have a tight end chip or running back chip to help on the outside. There aren't stunts. It's mano-a-mano. We're going to line up number 5 across from you. And Thibodeaux got the best of Ekwonu in the preseason game between the Panthers and Giants. Go back and look at the tape, Lewis. And it's just something that really stuck out to me. I want to know if that's a trend come the regular season, or if it's, hey, second-year player, young player, still developing, still trying to figure out what he needs to do to be successful in this league, hopefully for the next decade plus, protecting the blind side of Bryce Young.
I think what you said there, I think really hits it on the head. Is it a trend? I think the preseason, especially with the bona fide starters, with the players who are big pieces of your franchise, the preseason asks questions and the regular season gives you answers.
I like
and
that.
I think that's what that's something we're gonna have to see. I agree. Ickey has been, up and down in the preseason, and you want consistency. To be fair, I think the Giants defense is also very good. Kayvon Thibodeaux is fantastic. Like, I think he's gonna. I mean, people forget he was hurt for a good chunk of the season last year, dealing with some of those injuries. The knee injury, I believe, he got in the preseason. Like, and he was a rookie last year too. So he's gonna take some time, and I think he could be someone who takes a major step up as well. But it's you want consistency. You want to not have to worry about your team in general. I think that offensive line play is something that we have seen. Just not a whole lot of great offensive line play in the NFL preseason this year. And I think some of that is the nature of practices and how they're not as physical as they used to be, because, for a lot of times, good reasons, right? So you have to assess that. But also I think too, I don't know. I have questions about the offensive line, and I need answers come the regular season. I just think that's.
I credit you, Lewis, in this regard. There's times where we want to shoot it to our listeners and viewers straight, but with preseason, it'll confirm your confirmation biases if that's
Yeah.
what you're looking for. But the word I focus on of what you just said is the consistency. And you need 4, 5, 6 game sample size during the regular season to say, hey, is what my eyes telling me is that the truth? Or again, is it just a preseason matchup where you're not game planning, you're not scheming? Uh, Thibodeaux could very well end up taking off and having a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber season for the Giants. That's why he was a top pick a year ago. And so I fully expect him to have a great season. Ekwonu as well. He was something they were calling him the pancake king when he was coming out of NC State. And it's like, okay, who does he want a sponsorship? Whether it's from IHOP, Denny's, name your favorite breakfast restaurant, Lewis.
Okay, no. If you're trying to be pancake king, IHOP's got to be the only choice, right?
Okay.
Denny's would be, in my mind, Denny's is more of like if you are a baseball guy and you're trying to like get like grand slams and things like that. That's where I would go more with that sponsorship. But sorry, I get very passionate about my breakfast restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, I'd throw a Cracker Barrel in that mix. I could keep going.
Cracker Barrel, okay. Actually, so I recently went to a Cracker Barrel because my girlfriend's aunt sent her like a gift card for Cracker Barrel for like Christmas or something like that. And I think Cracker Barrel has kind of like improved their game a little bit. They've got like this potato casserole thing at the side, very good. Like very good. Would highly recommend. But yeah, I don't know. I am passionate. I'm a big guy. I am passionate about my stuff.
Again, the Pancake King, Ickey Ekwonu, we'll see, turns things around come the regular season, week 1. Lewis, we will move on from pro to college. And you've done some great reporting about North Carolina receiver Tez Walker and his eligibility. If you could quickly just walk us through where we're at, and it looks like this week we could very well get a decision on whether the NCAA will allow him to play during the 2023 season or not. I want to turn the floor over to you because, again, you've done some great reporting on this topic.
So there's the issue with a lot of NCAA, with a lot of the appeals and things like that, is there is not a set timeline, a set guideline. Like it is not, if you put in the appeal request here, you're going to hear an answer within 3 weeks. It's nothing like that. It varies. The research has to be done, all that kind of stuff. So really, where things stand currently is where things have been standing. I know there were some reports that I'm sorry, I apologize. I forget who specifically put this out there last week, towards the end of last week, that the UNC football coaching staff was, hopeful that things would work out and that we could be hearing something soon. That's where things have been since the waiver was put out there. And it's tough because for those of you, I know there's been a little bit of pushback regarding the Tez Walker situation. Some people are like, oh, of course UNC wants more from this, and of course they're going to be like, you hear a lot of different people, oh, what's different with this eligibility concern than other eligibility concerns in the past, and blah blah blah. I think some of that just goes back to the fact that the NCAA, I really need the NCAA to get a hold of things. A lot of concerns can be said about the NCAA. I won't get into that right now. But with Tez's situation, right, it goes into the fact that you go all the way back to his high school years. He signs with ETSU, never makes it to campus because he tears his ACL and his signing is deferred. He eventually goes on to sign with NCCU, but NCCU never plays football that season because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So he transfers to Kent State. That is the argument that UNC is putting forward, is that he has truly only played for one other team, and that was Kent State. Also, part of what UNC is saying is that the NCAA has put forward, it was back in early January, saying, hey, we are going to really tap down on these two-time transfers. We don't want people essentially bopping from school to school to school like it's some kind of free agency. But they put forward that note, and Tez Walker had already enrolled at UNC 3 days to them putting forward this note. So, like, I don't know. It's one of those things where logically there's just not a whole lot of logic there that seems to make sense and apply. So what UNC football, what head coach Mac Brown has said is that they feel very good that when you lay the facts out, it just makes sense that Tez Walker would be given immediate eligibility. And he has emphasized a lot that he's like, hey, obviously we want him to play because this matters for our football team. He would be the number one receiver on the team. But he's like, it's more of what he is going through and the issues that he is having. Mac Brown has brought up a lot of the mental health concerns, saying that this is really impacting him, that he's just really kind of at a loss just in general because of a variety of different reasons. His grandmother's health, wanting to play in front of her. He's from the Charlotte area originally, so this would be like a playing in your backyard thing, with that Bank of America Stadium game, where they're playing South Carolina to start the season, the first Saturday in September. So really, there's not a whole lot of development in this situation. UNC remains optimistic that something will happen. But the main issue, the main concern is just the timeline. That's really what it boils down to, because at this point, they've had this in for several weeks now. And we are 2.5 weeks away, 2 weeks away from the start of the college football season. A little less than 2 weeks, actually. Yeah, because their first game will be the first Saturday in September. We're recording this as of August 21st. Yeah, and UNC will play South Carolina in Bank of America Stadium on September 2nd. So a little less than 2 weeks. Last time Mac Brown talked to the media, he said, that Tez Walker is still practicing with the ones. He's still practicing as if he will be eligible to play. So UNC has a good group of receivers to fall back on if Tez Walker is unable to play. Another transfer, and Nate McCollum would be a good one. You've got some experience with Kobe Paysor, JJ Jones. There are plenty of really solid receivers on UNC's team, but Tez Walker is someone who can elevate solid to great.
Yeah, let me hop in here, Lewis, because we talked some off the pod last week about all of this. And I understand that Tez Walker put up numbers at Kent State. And my meatball take was like, okay, I know this is at Kent State. I know he put up numbers there, but what about when he transfers to Power 5? You so kindly pointed out to me, you say, Mark, he's on the Blitnikoff Award preseason list at the receiver position. And for as excited as we are about Drake May and a potential Heisman campaign, what that potentially looks like if Tez Walker isn't granted the eligibility. I guess where I come down on this is this. It's like he never played for the first two schools he went to. And it's like, meanwhile, across the road in Raleigh, NC State has a seventh-year senior in Bradley Rosner at the receiver position. Now, I understand he hasn't had as many transfers, but it's like, I know it's not a totally apples to apples comparison, but it's like, if he's allowed to continue to play, and if Walker put in his eligibility, his transfer to UNC before the NCAA changed its policy, wouldn't it abide by the previous policy and the old policy? That's kind of where I fall with all of that. And the big question you got to ask yourself, and you answered it pretty well, Lewis, is if he's deemed ineligible by the NCAA, what this offense looks like without him on the field, what that does for what we're expecting for a big, big season from Drake May and company from an offensive standpoint.
Well, and my thing too is you can't, I don't think it's right necessarily for the NCAA to change a rule and put that rule into place immediately when there are a lot of situations that, people have been in the process of figuring out where they're going, have said they're going to be transferring multiple times. I think personally, what the NCAA should have done is say, hey, we're going to tighten down on these two-time transfers starting at the end of this next transfer window, starting at the end of spring football, because then you give people the opportunity to prepare accordingly. It's because the whole thing is right. What the NCAA doesn't want to have happening is where you have a lot of people who enter the transfer portal who are looking for different positions, and they don't want to be spending the time to review each situation on a case-by-case basis. That's a lot of time and effort that has to be put into it. But I don't think that that's something you can get around, because these are all different case-by-case situations. I don't know. I digress. I think it would be a shame, I think, if Tez Walker is not allowed to play this upcoming season. But I think, more than anything, the NCAA needs to kind of come up with plans and stick with them. I understand it's a little bit of the Wild West right now. If I was a college athlete, it would be a very frustrating situation right now.
Let me say one other thing too is if he projects to play in the NFL, even if it's just to have a cup of coffee, Lewis, that is life-changing money.
Yeah.
That's significantly more, considerably more for most athletes than an NIL deal, right?
No.
So we talked about, okay, the ramifications and the impact on Drake May and the offense this season. If he's not allowed to play, we don't know who the North Carolina Tar Heels quarterback is going to be in the 2024 season. We could guess, we could surmise, but if I'm Tez Walker and I want to showcase my ability to play for NFL scouts that will be at plenty of games in the 2023 season, I want Drake May as my quarterback, point blank, period.
I mean, no, it's huge. And I think if I'm like, that's why you have receivers who are coming here to play at UNC. And I think too, it's like I'm in 9 out of 10 situations, I am personally going to side with the, like, you look at the facts, and then if there's a bit of a toss up, I go with the athlete just because, like, it's a person versus like a giant organization in the NCAA. I don't know. And I just, it's a huge, there are going to be so many more eyes on Tez Walker if he were playing with Drake May as his quarterback, if he's the number one receiver for a guy who's on a Heisman conversation.
So you're going to potentially limit his ability to make money at the next level because look, like one of the big questions I have this year, and yes, you mentioned a lot of the receivers on the Tar Heels roster, but I don't want to shortchange what Josh Downs did a season ago and Antoine Green did in making Drake May for what we expect this season again, where he's on, Heisman preseason lists. Part of that is because of the play of his receivers from a season ago.
Yeah.
If Tez Walker helps with that transition for this season, those are the stakes of what we're talking about, Lewis.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that's brought up, right, is if he has to sit out a year, he'd still have 2 years of eligibility. But once again, you don't, like, UNC has had a really good stretch here where they went, Sam Howell to Drake May. There's no guarantee, just like with like the Packers, right? They go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. There's no guarantee that like Jordan Love is going to be the guy. There's no guarantee that, Connor Harrell or whoever that starting quarterback would be next year for UNC is going to be the guy. So you want to try and take advantage of your situation that you're in immediately.
I want to say one other thing too, and I want to go to the running back position for the Tar Heels really quickly, Lewis.
Sure.
We're like 2 weeks away from kickoff. We're getting closer and closer to the season, which I can't wait for. British Brooks coming back for the Tar Heels. I know right now he's maybe second or third on the depth chart. I've seen this before with Mac Brown. Back in 2011, when I was a student at Mizzou, Henry Josie, who was the Big 12's leading rusher at the time, went on to have an NFL career, goes down for Missouri. And I'd never seen this before. Mac Brown, we were playing Texas, comes over from the opposing sidelines to check on the running back. Torn ACL, torn MCL, torn patellar tendon. Wished him good luck. 2 years later, Josie's back on the field in 2013, one of the SEC's leading rushers, and then he went on to have an NFL career. I'm not saying British Brooks is going to go on to the NFL, but when he gets his opportunity in his moment this season, he's going to show up for the Tar Heels, whether that's a special teams role, whether that's his opportunities to carry the football whenever he gets them in a crowded running back room. But I want to say this too. He was a player who represented the Tar Heels at the ACC kickoff a year ago. When he gets back onto the field, or maybe 2 years back, but it's going to be like 611 days since he was last on a football field, Lewis.
Yeah.
When he gets his opportunity for the Tar Heels this season, keep your eye on British Brooks this season. I've seen this before. I'm manifesting this now, and we're going to look back on this clip and be like, how did Mark know that? It's because I've seen it before with Mac Brown and his effect on saying, hey, we need to get this player back and someone who's a key member of this team a few seasons back. British Brooks, keep an eye on him, Lewis.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that, like, Brown has said himself regarding, like, the running back room in general. They have a lot of really good players, and they're going to identify, situationally who's good at what and, assess it accordingly and put them forward. So, I think British Brooks is very loved in that locker room. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see him, play a solid role this year as long as he stays healthy. Yeah. And I know for everyone listening and watching, we have talked a lot about UNC football today, but remember, we are less than 2 weeks from the start of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
NC State playing not this Thursday, but next Thursday. UNC playing not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And then Duke playing 2 weeks from today on Labor Day against Clemson. Next week on Triangle and Two, we're going to be talking a lot about all three teams, previewing everything. It's going to be a college football spectacular. Really excited for it. It's one of my favorite times of the year.
Cannot wait, Lewis. And I also want to thank Chris Duhon. If you missed our conversation with the former Duke legend, check that out on our YouTube page and wherever you listen to your podcasts too. If you enjoyed the conversation too, feel free to give him a shout out on social media. Lewis, we had a lot of great feedback with our conversation with him now that he's coaching his son at the high school level in the Charlotte area, Gaston Christian School as well. So really enjoyed that conversation with Chris Duhon. Lewis, I think that's a full show here on WRAL Triangle and Two, unless there's anything else you need to tease to with WRAL sports coverage this upcoming week.
No, let's just keep doing the thing. Very excited to get back into the football season. We're very, very close. It's gonna be good stuff, Mark.
For Luis Fernandez, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you so much for watching WRAL Triangle and Two. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care and so long, everybody.